Yes, 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 yes. This is what I'm talking about, friends. This is why I love reviewing progressive rock music. This is what gets me excited about the music that I love, the music that I constantly am on the lookout for, because once every couple of months, something's going to knock me off my feet and just prove to me why I love this kind of music. So, without further ado, let's dive into this one. Omni from Karfagen. So Karfagen is from the brainchild of Anthony Kalusian. Anthony is a Ukrainian superstar when it comes to the progressive rock landscape, getting his start in the early 2000s and putting out some really interesting and really dynamic retro symphonic prog. I found out about him with his 2019 records of Echoes from Within Dragon Island and the follow-up of The Birds of Passage, and I've just been kind of keeping my eye on all things Anthony since then. And if you can believe it, this is his, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 21st studio recording from the Karfagen family. You know, last year he put out 3 records, if you can imagine. Messages from Afar, The Sacred Nature, The Working tapes, and then Land of Chameleons. And the thing about Karfagen is that you're never going to get a bad record. The most that I can say is that a lot of his records do tend to become derivative of one another. They do feel very same, but I'm always keeping my eyes and ears peeled because there's always going to be something that will come out of, a jam session that I'm like, oh, that was really interesting. Or there will be some passage that just catch me off guard of being like, that's a really interesting way of constructing that. And so because of that, I'm always keeping my eyes and ears out for whatever he's going to put out on next. And I feel like Omni, one of his biggest statements up until this point, it's really a concept album about all or universal. That's what Omni means. It's, the all is one, the one is all, unity, and just like we're all in this kind of together. And that is really exemplified by the talent that our boy Anthony has on here. Not only is Anthony doing the main keyboards, some of the vocals, the bass, and the production, the construction, and the actual orchestration of this, he's got talent like John Hackett on flute. We've got Richard Sinclair from Camel from, doing some vocals and some of the fretless bass. We've got individuals from the Canadian band of Mystery, Jean Piaget, I believe is how you pronounce it, Jean Piaget, on vocals, as well as Marco Gromhan, I think that's how you pronounce it, from Sliven on vocals, Bostow Coexist from College and Kadam, as well as Michel St. Pierre, who is also from Mystery. A lot of individuals from Mystery, from these very neo prog bands, Camel, Caravan, Mystery, Sliven, and that is found really baked into the DNA of this album. So many times I'm listening to it and I'm like, am I listening to a Sliven record? Am I listening to a Mystery record? Because it has that kind of energy and essence, but painted through a brush that Anthony is really well holding on to. And this album is one of those records that I absolutely love in that it's what I call a playthrough record, kind of like how some Broadway shows are sing-through, where there's really no dialogue. It's really just going from song to song to song with no real breaks in between. We're looking at Hamilton, we're looking at Les Mis, where, again, all the dialogue is taking place through song. This playthrough kind of an album, even though there are 10 tracks, there's really no break between any of these tracks, and it feels much more like a single album. We're looking at Spirit from Mystery. We're looking at The Whirlwind from Transatlantic. Kind of one track kind of adjacent album where they'll go through many different dips and dives and have, moments here and there. It creates a very pleasant start to finish sequence of music, and the music that is found on here is Anthony's best by a very large margin. I'm thinking of some of his past works that he's done, and nothing even comes close to the the vibes that he's providing on here, the pleasant atmosphere. It's almost like if you took the doom and more dark atmosphere that you would get with a neo-prog and brought it into more of a symphonic retro prog sounding aspect. This is what we're getting with Omni. And it almost does this album a little bit of a disservice to kind of break it up and talk about it track by track, even though there is motifs, there are themes that are reprised and brought back into the fold. I'm looking at the second track of Storyteller as well as the final track of Storyteller Part 2 that have this really great call and answer moment. I feel like the Omni Overture does a really good job of opening up this record, that the Storyteller kind of continues on, and it's going to lay down some lyrical themes that are going to be reprised. There's going to be some, musical themes that are going to be reprised throughout. And I love the ideas that are found on this record. Not only are we talking about all, or we're all one, it's also talking about stories and how we're all involved in them and how we shape ourselves from them. We're looking at like The Spark and The Mirror of Soul and tracks like You and I, which really goes to show that we are knowing one another by telling stories. We know one another by our experiences with other people and how those stories shape us and how the music folds us into that. And I love the dips and dives within the actual music itself. Whispers from the Past is a little bit more chill. It's a little bit more haunting. I'm feeling like something from like a Steve Hackett or a Camel that then come into The Spark that feels a little bit more like Yes, a little bit more like Genesis, a little bit more upbeat and flowing style. We then get into kind of near the midpoint of this album with Master Plan that feels a little bit more neo-prog. We got a little bit of those darker aspects, darker stylings on there. And then coming into the Mirror of Souls that have a little bit more of the retro symphonic prog with, some flutes and some, that great synthesizers that are being provided on here. And all of this is within the first half of this record, and it doesn't feel like this is disjointed. It doesn't feel like it's too choppy or anything like that. It feels like it's a cohesive flow. And the second half of this record, starting with Unchained, going into The Cards We Play, and You and I, this all feels like more modern retro prog. I'm thinking of like Southern Empire. I'm thinking of the Baroque Project. That kind of more modern retro prog that we're getting. And I love that not only is Anthony channeling that, but he's also kind of drawing influences from other sources without it feeling like a ripoff, without it feeling like it's derivative. It feels like it's its own thing, and it's the drive, it's that build, it's the climb, so that when we get to the Storyteller Part 2, the final track off this album, it feels like an earned journey. It feels like we've come full circle. We are, rejuvenated by all that music that came before to provide such a brilliant finale of this record. So, yeah, in the end, Omni really knocked me off my socks. I've absolutely been enjoying this record. I've been coming back to it time and time again, and this one might be one of my favorite retro symphonic progressive rock albums of the year. Like, it's this and Jacob Roberge. I feel like still Jacob's got the crown, and, this is going for the crown, but it'll have to take a very pleasant second place, but still, I think it's Anthony's best work to date. I think you would be foolish not to check it out. So, yeah, I think my final rating for this record will be Omni by Karfagen is an album that I absolutely love with my whole heart. Legitimately, if this record isn't in my top 10 of the year, we're going to have an amazing year of retro progressive rock music, because dang, this one just, it fills me with so much joy. Like, this is why I come to this type of music. This is why I seek it out, because I always get surprised, with a band that has so many amazing records. I'm floored. I'm absolutely flabbergasted. So, this one gets the note seal of approval. This one is a run, don't walk to go and listen to it. Once you have heard it, let me know if you loved it or if you hated it by commenting down below. And I think that's where I'm going to leave you for today. So, thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.